Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show, special trade deadline edition. The Los Angeles Lakers have made a trade this morning. They traded Gabe Vincent and a 2032 second-round pick for Luke Kennard, addressing one of the team's biggest needs in three-point shooting. I think the Lakers entered this trade deadline with three clear needs: defense, athleticism, and three-point shooting. They address one of those three. I think arguably the least important, in my opinion. If we're ranking these, I still think defense and athleticism are the two glaring needs for this roster, but three-point shooting is right there. It is not far behind. They add one of the league's best three-point shooters, if not, statistically the best. Has been the best three-point shooter in the NBA over the past 5 seasons, shooting 46% on his threes over the past 5 years and shooting 51% on open threes this year. Right now, the Lakers only have 3 players shooting above 40% on open threes in Rui, Luka, and Austin. So comparing Luke Kennard to Gabe Vincent, but also comparing him to guys like Marcus Smart and Jake LaRavia and Jared Vanderbilt, there is a huge uptick in terms of his three-point shooting, his ability to come off screens. I think there's some interesting guard-to-guard screening options here where he can screen for Luka, he can screen for Austin, and then operate out of the short roll. That is a way that he has been used in the past. So I have been saying going on the last week or so that I think the Lakers have or should have had 2 objectives at the trade deadline. Objective number 1 is what was the pie in the sky version of the deadline, where they likely flipped a first-round pick for a future front court starter. If you look at how the Lakers are planning the offseason, they're going into the offseason building around Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves. That is a backcourt pairing offensively. They are a little bit different defensively, where Luka is a forward defensively, Austin is a guard. But from an offensive perspective, at least, you have a couple of guards that you are trying to build around. So the Lakers need front court pieces. I am not convinced that any of the current players, outside of potentially retaining LeBron, which obviously remains unclear, are like long-term fits as front court starters. I think I have, at least as starters, right? Like I think there are versions where DA or Jackson can make sense off the bench. There are versions of this team where I think Rui can make sense off the bench. But in terms of the 5, 4, and 3 of the future, I don't think those players are currently on the roster. So that was my big goal for the Lakers. Could you go out and get that type of player? That does not seem to be in the cards. The Lakers are still trying to make moves here. They have Maxi Kleber and Dalton Connect to potentially trade, whether that is attaching Dalton to Maxi or just trading Dalton straight up for finding a team that still sees the potential and upside in Dalton. I think it's unlikely that they're able to find that type of team. There's just not really been a market for Dalton. His defense, the shooting has tailed off. I think there's some basketball IQ questions with him, processing the game. There's some real questions with him, and his value has tanked from even the end of last season, to say nothing of the beginning of last season. So I'm skeptical that they end up finding a move for him. Like they had the one bullet or the one realistic bullet with the second round pick. They used that obviously in this trade. But my second objective for the Lakers, if they did not find that future front court starter, was going to be at least upgrading the back end of the rotation, because I think we could look at the top 9, which for me would be some version of the starting lineup, whatever version you want to pick, which would big 3 plus DeAndre Ayton plus 1 of Marcus, Jake, or Rui. Then 2 of those players that, the 2 guys who are not starting are the 6th and 7th men. Then you get to the Jackson Vando part of the rotation. Then there was a real drop off. The Lakers really struggled defensively with Gabe Vincent on the floor. He had become a glaring target for opponents where with the Lakers switching scheme, they would go at Gabe Vincent repeatedly, and the Lakers almost treated him like a stopper at times, which didn't really understand, especially based on his size constraints. But I think like that being out of the rotation, I think is a positive. But like they needed to upgrade that spot because Gabe was not shooting the ball well, not contributing offensively well, and also was a big defensive liability. And then we get into the Dalton Connect, Maxi Kleba, Bronny James, Adu Thero part of the rotation where that's just a level of player that should not be playing for a team that has deep playoff aspirations. So the Lakers clearly needed to upgrade that spot in the rotation, be it Gabe or Maxi or Dalton. Gabe and Maxi with the expirings, Dalton as a player with one more year left on his deal. And I think in flipping Gabe plus a second, actually putting an asset on the table, they did improve the roster. Now, I want to get into Kennard's fit, some of the upside with this move, some of the downside with this move, but I've been critical of the Lakers for seemingly not going for it. There was a report earlier in the week from Brian Windhorst that they were only offering their expirings without any picks attached, and I was critical of that. So they made a move. They attached a second round pick, and we'll see what ends up happening in terms of Luke Kennard's fit and if he is an expiring contract. So the Lakers will have to make a decision with him this summer, and they are trying to have that max cap space to go after Giannis, another star, another couple starting level guys. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. It's too early to project, but in terms of why make this trade, again, I think I'm going to go through a series of questions here, and then we'll get into the Q&A, and we're going to go through the deadline. So going to be tracking whatever comes through in terms of potential moves. But why make this trade for LA? So again, at the top, I said LA had three needs going into the deadline: defense, athleticism, and three-point shooting. They addressed one of these three needs in a big way. There is a big gap between Gabe Vincent and Luke Kennard as shooters. But I mean, there's a gap between Luke Kennard and most of the NBA. Like he is a top, JJ used the top 1% line for Dalton. Luke Kennard's the top 0.1%. Even in the playoffs, he's a 44% three-point shooter. So this is just a straight up elite three-point shooter who I think really can help in that regard. He is a laser. He is one of the primary lasers in the NBA. And he's not just a spot up laser the way that say like Rui is primarily spot up catch and shoot guy, can maybe relocate a little bit. Kennard is a guy who can relocate. He can be flying around floppy actions on the baseline. He can be flying off dribble handoffs. He can just be relocating, moving around the arc. Like he is one of these guys who can catch at any point along the arc, feet not set, flying around and still cash threes at a very high rate. So one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. You could argue the best three-point shooter in the NBA from a percentage and efficiency standpoint. Again, leads the NBA over the past 5 seasons. So there's a real upgrade here. And again, I think with where things were at with Gabe, he was not really helping the Lakers on either side of the floor. So I would say Kennard is actually a worse defender than Gabe. And I do have some reservations here in terms of if teams are targeting Gabe and looking at him as a glaring target, they're going to target Luke Kennard even harder because Luke Kennard has been targeted his entire career, and that's been one of the limiting factors with him. And for those who have, when he was back with the Clippers, anytime, like one of my favorite running bits that I would talk about on the show was LeBron targeting Luke Kennard. Like at least as long as I've covered LeBron and been covering the Lakers, Luke Kennard has been LeBron's favorite target in terms of when the Clippers would try, or Memphis or whoever would try to close games with Luke Kennard. The entire offense would just, boil down to LeBron, high pick and roll. Where's Luke Kennard's man? Get Luke Kennard switched on to me. I'm going to bully ball Luke Kennard. So there's some concern with that, right? But at least he is providing something offensively that Gabe Vincent couldn't provide. I'm a little lower on Luke's overall fit. Like I view him more as the 9th or 10th man in the rotation. Again, I think there's a clear top 7 that he's not going to sniff. Then he's in that Jackson Hayes Vando range where it's like maybe a little bit more matchup based, a little bit more how's he shooting that night? How does the opponent, like, can they target him? Do the Lakers need more size? Do they need more athleticism? Like, I think there's a lot of context and circumstance that go into his ultimate role. But again, the Lakers don't have this type of, like, this is what Dalton Kennard is supposed to be, that he is clearly not. This is even, I think, a higher level than Rui. I know from like a percentage standpoint, Rui is in the same ballpark, but in terms of versatility as a shooter, it's not close between Kennard and Rui. And now I think the Lakers have officially have two lasers, which is more than they had before, right? I think Rui and Kennard both qualify as lasers. This trade, it was more of a win now move, and there is some downside with that. The Lakers are now out. Like, they can't make another move at the deadline in terms of flipping the second round pick. And it does take a second off the table this summer. But if we're going to say this group is worth investing in, if we're going to criticize the inactivity and the passive approach that the Lakers have often had at trade deadlines and in trade cycles, I think it is fair and warranted to acknowledge that, hey, they made a move. They tried to improve the roster. They put actual draft capital on the table. And now, how much does this actually move the needle? That remains to be seen. I do have real reservations about Kennard as a playoff player because of his defensive limitations. That has been something that has been a limiting factor for him. And I don't think, ideally the shooter that the Lakers added could have played with the big three and just been that, sort of what Rui was earlier in the season, but an even better version of that. Like when the Lakers had the good stretches with Rui, playing alongside Luka and LeBron and Austin and whatnot. I don't think you could play Luke Kennard with the big three. I think it's got to be only bench. You can't even, like, let's just say you're starting Marcus. I don't think you could sub Luke in for Marcus and really play that lineup against good teams. You're just not good enough defensively. Like, not even close, right? Like, he's objectively a worse defender than Gabe. So that like, they almost get worse defensively, which is a bit of a concern for a team that entered today, I believe 24th in defensive rating, if I'm not mistaken. That's a concern. But offensively, playing off, like, just thinking about the shot quality he's going to get next to Luka, next to Austin, next to LeBron, the bench possibilities of him just simply taking the Gabe role. And if it is Luka and Kennard and then a couple Banshees and a center, or LeBron and Kennard and a couple Banshees and a center, I think those lineups can be really effective. And then you could even go to some small ball looks with him out there. I think he could fit into the zone. I guess that's probably, like, I don't think the Lakers should be switching 1 through 4 with Luke Kennard. We'll see how they change the scheme, because again, he'll be someone that is relentlessly targeted. But I give the Lakers credit for actually going for it, in the sense of trying to improve the roster and actually putting draft capital on the table. Now, was it the first round pick? Did they eat into the cap space? Did they add the future starter? No, right? But I do want to acknowledge at least an attempt to improve the roster and make something of a small win now move. I would say I would not classify this obviously as a big or even medium move. In terms of upside, again, Luke is one of the league's best shooters, and he was added to one of the league's worst shooting teams. So I think if Luke Kennard can have, like, he's going to have some games where he hits 4 or 5, maybe even 6 threes and swings a quarter, swings a half, maybe even swings a game. And that is obviously going to help the Lakers. He helps them, I think, hold their own in shootouts, where the Lakers have not really been able to do that consistently this season. I also think he will have a lot of value and utility in some of these Luka, like the 1 or 2 star bench led groups. I think he could have a lot of utility as a movement shooter and corner shooter. And again, I think he's just a better and more useful rotation player right now than Gabe Vincent, despite his defensive limitations. in terms of downside, I think the clear downside here is just how much does Kennard really move the needle? He's been in and out of the rotation in a lot of his spots. I think they're, again, like he's probably more of the 9th or 10th man on this team. So when you're adding a 9th or 10th player, again, like it's an upgrade, but it's like, I'll say, like I was looking into some of his advanced metrics, right? And looking at B-ball index, the LeBron numbers that they have the LeBron stat, just for some reference here, defensively, he rates out on a similar level to the big three and Dalton. So not well. All those guys are subpar defenders in the defensive LeBron metric, D LeBron. And then offensively, he actually rates out worse offensively than defensively in offensive LeBron, and was comparable to Vando. So just for some perspective on this, like when actually looking at his overall LeBron data compared to the rest of the roster, the only 3 players that rated worse than him on the team are Rui, Dalton, and Gabe, right? And Dalton and Gabe, we know how much they have struggled and how much those minutes have hurt. Rui is pretty low in the metric as well. But point being, like, while he has a clear skill and will clearly help in that regard, he's not a rebounder. I think he's a sneakily underrated passer, but like still not really a big strength of his. Decent ball handler, but again, more of like a secondary guy that can help grease the wheels, not really going to run the offense at all. But a big defensive liability, and also not an athletic or strong player. So there's some just physical limitations there. Again, like doesn't really help the defense, or let's be clear, not doesn't help the defense, hurts the defense. Hurts the defense and arguably hurts the athleticism, which to me were probably the 2 biggest needs at the deadline. I think it's fair to wonder, like, if he could even play in the playoffs in against certain teams. Like I'm thinking about against an OKC or a Denver or even a San Antonio. Like I think the top teams in the West are going to be able to expose and target him at a level that I don't know how, even in Minnesota, like I don't know how he fares in those types of series. And then there's also the opportunity cost of just, was the upgrade from Gabe to Luke enough to warrant giving up a second and not having that second this summer to potentially throw in for, because they'll get access to their 2033 second as well. So they'll have a couple seconds this summer. They'll have the 2 firsts, technically 3 for a few hours. They get access to 2026 on draft day, and then also 2033 on draft day. But 2026, remember, they will be using the day of the draft. Let me just make sure nothing has happened here. All right. Think we're good for right now. But yeah, I mean, there's a bit of an opportunity cost here of just like, if they flip, if this essentially if this essentially plays out as they just flipped a second for Kennard walks and the Lakers just don't have a second and they lost in the first round, it's an admirable attempt. It's at least the bare minimum attempt here from the front office, but like, what did it ultimately lead to or net, right? Like he's still an expiring in the same way that Gabe is, and now they don't have a second, which again, I think like him playing the minutes over Gabe will ultimately net out as more of a positive than Gabe, who had really been struggling lately. I just do wonder if like I would say it's a marginal upgrade. I don't think it's some seismic upgrade between Gabe Vincent and Luke Kennard. Like, maybe you say notable, but still, I think he's more of a 9th, 10th man. I don't think he's some like starting level player or even like high level bench player. I still think when we're talking about some of the other teams in the West, he's probably not playing for most of them. So I want to temper expectations a little bit here. But again, like the Lakers have really needed shooting. So I do want to acknowledge that. But like he's not there are certain guys, like you look at a Sam Hauser, a Sam Merrill. I think those guys hold up better defensively. Luke Kennard is really limited defensively, and he's also small at around like 6'4", 6'5". In terms of what's next for the Lakers, my understanding is that the Lakers are still exploring the trade market in terms of some sort of move to trade Maxey and or Dalton. I think Dalton is the more likely one between the two, but it could be a situation where they're adding Dalton as the sweetener to get off Maxey's contract, or they are just flipping Dalton for another rookie scale or minimum level player, and Dalton is the primary asset going out. But I think that's unlikely as of right now, and as of what I've heard in terms of the league-wide interest in Dalton, there's just not a lot. So certainly something small, another small thing could happen, but I would bet right now on this being the Lakers' only move. Does not sound like they're going to trade the first. Does not sound like they're going to trade Rui or DeAndre Ayton or Adu or anyone else in the rotation right now outside of potentially Maxey or Dalton. So this means the Lakers are looking ahead to the summer when they believe they will be in the mix for Giannis Antetokounmpo. My understanding of their ambitions with that would seen a lot of different things being floated out in terms of their package. My understanding is they do not want to put Austin Reeves in that package for Giannis. It would primarily be the 3 picks, which technically you could agree to the trade on draft day and then not execute it until free agency starts. So you can say, hey, we're trading Milwaukee 2031 and 2033 and the rights to our 2026 picks. So you would draft on behalf of Milwaukee and then send them those 3 picks. And then it could potentially even expand to a 3-team trade where another team gets off a contract and dumps it onto Milwaukee and adds in assets. So maybe if a team wants to get off a contract they don't want, they can attach a first or something to get to Milwaukee. Because part of the problem sometimes with these things is like if a team it doesn't have the flexibility to take on a large contract or doesn't have interest in taking on a large contract, you can't just dump a contract on someone. But if Milwaukee's saying, hey, we're tearing the whole thing down and now we are pivoting in a direction where we're about rebuilding and asset accumulation and we'll take your bad contracts for assets, maybe there's a 3-team framework where the Lakers send Milwaukee the 3 picks, Lakers get Giannis, and then maybe the Lakers send something out depending on what. They don't really have much to trade unless Austin is agreeing to a sign and trade, which that's the other key thing here that people are overlooking. When people are just like, oh, Austin and the 3 picks, Austin has to agree to a sign and trade. I am incredibly skeptical Austin would sign off on a sign-in trade to go to a rebuilding Milwaukee team. Everything I know about Austin is that he wants to compete. He wants to be in the playoffs. He wants to have a chance to win a title. So I think if the Lakers presented Austin as, hey, would you like to go to Milwaukee in a sign-in trade? I think Austin just bolts at that point and goes and signs somewhere else. Now, there's been some cap space shifts with teams that were projected to have cap space, like Utah, for example, losing that cap space. So that could play into the Lakers' favor with Austin in some of the negotiations in terms of there not being as many suitors. So that is a factor where maybe it ends up being a sign and trade is potentially his best option. But I think if it came down to it and a team needed, there are teams that can clear cap space if they need to. And if it was like, hey, Austin Reeves is potentially available and he and the Lakers are moving in a different direction, I think there would be suitors for Austin. Now, I don't know what, like maybe he does have to take a little bit of a pay cut there, but I think if it's between choosing his destiny and, because remember, last contract cycle, he was sort of at like the Lakers could match whatever he signed. So even if he signed an offer sheet, the Lakers were going to match it, and that scared off potential suitors. I think having some freedom for him would be important and not just being like, well, I'm going to be dictated to getting traded to Milwaukee here and being in Siberia for the next 3-4 years. But it is worth noting that the Lakers do believe they are in the Giannis hunt. They also believe that if another star shakes loose, maybe a team loses in the first round of the playoffs, loses in the second round of the playoffs, and that type of star player becomes available, that they would be in the mix for that. They also potentially, depending on how much cap space they could clear up, could get in the mix for some of these restricted free agents, whether it's Walker Kessler, Peyton Watson, Tari Eason. I will note this one. I don't want to say I'm less confident in that than the Giannis trade, because I'm relatively less confident in them acquiring Giannis. But with the restricted free agents, it would almost certainly have to be the form of LA like overpaying. Like, let's say Walker Kessler's market is 25 million annual value. They probably have to pay 30 million or 32 million. If Peyton Watson's in the low to mid 20s, they probably got to pay high 20s or around 30, right? So to acquire these restricted free agents, you're going to have to overpay and force the team's hand. I don't think you're getting them at a discount. I don't think you're even getting them at market price. I think you're going to have to overpay if you're the Lakers or really any restricted free agent suitor. And then there's also some scenarios here where the Lakers potentially look at OKC. OKC is going to have to potentially make a decision on what they're going to do with Isaiah Hartenstein or Lou Dort. Could the Lakers get in the mix for that, right? Because let's say OKC doesn't win the title and they decide, hey, like Lou Dort and Isaiah Hartenstein, we got to make this decision. We're going to flip one of them. If it becomes an open market and an actual bidding war, the Lakers can get involved with one or potentially even two picks or a protected pick as the second pick to go get a Dort or Hartenstein or whichever. Like if some other team trades for Giannis and all of a sudden they need to make a player available, the Lakers could get in the mix for that. So a lot of this is like pie in the sky, to be clear. I think there's a lot of pressure for LA to nail this offseason, assuming they don't make a another win now move or find that front court starter here in the next hour 15. They're putting a lot on this offseason, because I think the upside of this offseason is you land a Giannis, you land another star, you land a couple of these restricted free agents, you maybe even add a restricted free agent, and then you trade for another starter from another team using some draft capital. That's like the upside here. The downside is Giannis gets traded elsewhere. No stars shake loose, or maybe they shake loose, they don't go to the Lakers. The restricted free agents stand pat and stay with their current situations. Teams look at, like, if I'm OKC, why would I trade Dort or Hartenstein to the Lakers? I would almost need an overpay to help another conference contender. If I'm OKC, it's like cross off Denver, cross off Houston, cross off Minnesota, cross off San Antonio, cross off the Lakers. Everybody else, I will consider trading Dort or Hartenstein to. Those teams, I'm not helping them at all whatsoever, which makes sense. That is a competitive mindset that I would not help a potential rival. And then they strike out in all those things, and now they're forced to basically run it back with, and some of these things are out of their control, right? Like DA, his market's been trending in the wrong direction. I think there's a real chance that if things continue the way that they're heading, or the way that they've been going, that DA just opts in next year. I don't think right now he would have much of a market above his $8 million player option. Marcus, I think, is TBD. He's clearly outperformed his contract, but with the age and the health, I'm not sure where his market's going to be. Then if the Lakers keep Rui, it's like, do they extend Rui? Do they re-sign him? Then you have the whole LeBron factor. You have Austin. So there's also, I think, a clear downside, like disaster scenario here, where you basically run it back potentially without LeBron, and maybe you add a starting level, you find someone with the non-taxpayer MLE, or you acquire like one player. But if you just have the same group and it's like take out LeBron and add Peyton Watson, or maybe there's like a small center upgrade, I just don't think that team is good enough or serious enough with the top of the West, to say nothing of where Detroit could be at that point. They could still make a big move this summer. The Knicks aren't going anywhere. So I just want to lay out both sides of this, right? Like the Lakers have big ambitions this summer, but they've had big ambitions before. I think back to the 2024 deadline. Remember, the framing at the 2024 deadline was we're going to have 3 picks to trade this summer, which technically was the same thing as this, where it's 3 picks on draft day. After that, it's 2 picks plus a drafted player. And then they did not make a move at the 2024 deadline. In the 2024 offseason, and entered the season with largely a similar roster. I think that would be a colossal disaster if that's the way that this plays out for LA. Like, they clearly need a new starting front court if LeBron's not back, and they need far better to it. Like, they need a lot of pieces. They need a lot of changes, and the 60 million, potentially 50 to 60 in cap space is nice, but especially if you're spending that on Giannis. Now, let's just say they land Giannis. You have Luka, Giannis, Austin, Jake, Vando, Dalton, Adu. And now you have one exception and a bunch of minimums to fill out the rest of the roster. And that's like assuming even like Marcus opts out, DA opts out, you renounce all the rights for guys. Like it gets a little scary there in terms of the depth and like the quality of the group. But those are questions we will not fully have the answers to, I think, until the off season, but potentially, I guess, in the next hour and 9 minutes or so. Just checking my phone, making sure I did not miss anything. And of course, I guess I sort of touched on this, but a key development in the last couple hours has been that Milwaukee officially is holding on to Giannis past the deadline, which that was the only way the Lakers were going to have a shot at getting Giannis. Of course, if he was traded, he would be gone, but like the Lakers were not going to get him at this deadline. It would have to be over the summer. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. I see we got a few super chats. First one from an NBA enjoyer. Thank you for the super chat. Need more defense still, but JJ plus Luke off-ball actions. Yes. Well, one, I think the Lakers need to start running more off-ball actions and diversifying the offense. And this is where JJ can get into his bag more now that he has this type of shooter. They need more defense. I think that is the understatement of the century. They are still a very bad defensive team, and as constructed, I think that's their fatal flaw. And especially in comparison to the other top 6 teams in the West, I don't think any of those other 5 teams have one side of the ball that's as concerning as the Lakers defense. But they were limited in their ability to make moves. A lot of that was their own doing, but they were limited in terms of the assets and what they could do. So they did improve the roster. They did add a clear need. And to your point, I love the thought of JJ implementing some of the actions that he ran during his career, that he wanted to run and did run last year with Dalton before Dalton fell out of the rotation. So yeah, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here with Luke in the offense. JM Ball, thank you for the super chat. Maybe take a gamble on Highsmith. He's healthy now. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned this. Haywood Highsmith has been waived, and I think he's a guy who would make a ton of sense for the Lakers. Looking at, I know he's been dealing with injuries all season, but pulling up his basketball reference page here, he has not played this year, but going back to last year, he shot 38% on threes. The year before, 40% on threes. His 3 preceding seasons, he was 34% or worse. So he has developed into a better 3-point shooter the last couple of years. I think he's someone who can defend the 2 or the 3, and even I would argue some 1s. I like some 3s will be too big for him. Some 1s will be too quick for him, but I think he's, especially in comparison to what the Lakers have, I think he would be a boost to the rotation. Decent rebounder for his size. And yeah, I think he's worth a look. He's worth a look. So the Lakers still have a roster spot available. They only have 14 guys under contract. Maybe they even clear a roster spot. Maybe they dump Dalton on someone and they are able to sign Highsmith and later Drew Timme or Kobe Buffkin as the 15th player and convert them, convert Timme off of the two-way or add Buffkin to a two-way and then eventually convert him. So yeah, there are different ways that this could play out with the back end of the roster. But if you put Highsmith, he's better than Dalton. He's better than Maxey. He's better than Adu. He's better than Bronny. So the Lakers can use all the help, especially like we're seeing now across the league. This season has been a war of attrition. You look at Denver, who cannot stay healthy with Jokic missed a bunch of time. Murray's missed time. Cam Johnson, Brown, Gordon. Now Peyton Watson went out last night with that hamstring injury. They can't catch a break. You look at OKC, Shea just went out. J-Dub's been out. Dort, Hartenstein, Caruso have all missed times. You look at the Lakers and how many injuries they've had. You go down the list, like a lot of the top teams and just across the league have dealt with multiple injuries for extended periods of time. Depth is really important. And the Lakers, we've seen when they've had to go into the real depths of the rotation, the real depths of the roster, it's a place you don't want to be. It is spots 11 to 14 on the Lakers roster. Highsmith coming in, like, again, I think it's a very marginal, small upgrade, but it's an upgrade. And I would much rather play Haywood Highsmith than Dalton Connect. It's not close for me. So yes, if they could potentially add him as a minimum flyer, that's a player I'd be open to. Jay Spares, worse than doing nothing. Wasted assets on, thank you for the super chat. Worse than doing nothing. Wasted assets on C. We did something move. Somehow we get Giannis with worse assets than Golden State. Timph nailed it. Fire everyone. I had not seen Jason say that, but that does not surprise me that he said that because he's been advocating for Rob to be fired. And I'm just checking his X account quickly. He didn't say anything about it, but I don't know if maybe he went live or something. I understand this, and that's where I talked about opportunity cost and the downside of this move. I'm not, for myself, I was advocating for LA to do something. I admittedly, I'm not the biggest Kennard guy. I actually think it might've been last stream where we talked about I think we talked about the Herter trade, and I referenced Herter and Kennard as like two guys who I feel like exist more in theory than they do in practicality within like their team's hierarchy. And I get the shooting, but I just think he's so limited in basically every other aspect of the game that, and is also small. Like I think there are guys, again, like a Merrill or a Hauser or even like a Doug McDermott who have been able, I think, to stay on the floor a little bit just due to like, I mean, Hauser's turned into like a respectable defender, but I think it's easier to play even to a lesser degree, like a guy like Rui. I think you can at least justify Rui because he's got a certain level of strength and athleticism, can hold his own defensively in some matchups, but like in general is a limited defender, but it's okay because he's got a certain amount of size. With Kennard, he's just so tiny that it makes it hard for him to play in certain configurations. But I was advocating for them to try to do something, move the second at a minimum. You can argue it's worse than doing nothing. You can argue the Lakers wasted an asset. I don't inherently disagree with that. I try to keep things as real as possible. And like, I'm not going to complain or advocate for LA to make a move, and then they make a move, and then I retract it. I was hoping they would get a better player than a Luke Kennard. I was also hoping they would get someone better defensively with more size and a little bit more athleticism. But they did address a need. I'm still really concerned about the state of the defense, and this does not help the state of the defense at all. But the thing with, so the one thing we have to keep in mind with the Giannis conversation, like, and this, the only people that can answer this, well, there's two people that can answer this right? It's Giannis. Is he even open to going to LA? And then it's Milwaukee. Like, what do they really want in a Giannis trade? Because you could even argue, looking at what Milwaukee was offering, like Kuminga is a very divisive player, right? And it was a hilarious conclusion to the Kuminga situation that he got traded for, the package he got traded for. But Kuminga is not necessarily a blue chip prospect anymore. He is not like a no-brainer future all-star, future like high-level starter on a contender. Like he could develop into that. He could also just develop into more of a bench scorer. Like there's a spectrum of Kuminga's future and where he's going to go in terms of his development. And then I mean, Pajemski and some of the, like, I think people fall in love with the names or like the potential. And the one thing the Lakers can offer that few, if any other teams can offer, is cap relief and flexibility. And it's like, hey, you could just trade Giannis into our space potentially. And you don't now, but that's assuming they're okay with not getting a blue chip player back. Because again, I made this point before. If Houston puts Amen Thompson and 2 picks on the table, that is better than anything the Lakers can offer. That's probably better than almost anything anyone else can realistically offer, right? But there's a huge gap between Amen Thompson and every other player that has been linked to the Bucks and Giannis. Anyone from Miami, anyone from Milwaukee. I mean, maybe McDaniels. Like I still would rather have Amen Thompson, but that's getting closer at least. Anyone from Golden State. Like there's not been a lot of great players actually offered, on the table for Giannis. So I'm not like I would not peg the Lakers as the favorites. I see some people are running with that narrative or that idea that the Lakers are now the favorites to land Giannis. I don't agree with that. I do agree with they're in the mix. Now, in the mix is relative. Are they third in the mix? Are they fifth in the mix? Are they seventh in the mix? Are they just on the list? Like, I don't know where exactly they are in that pecking order. But one thing they can offer that no one else can offer is like, because Milwaukee's cap situation is screwed. They with the Dame stretch and that they did the Miles Turner, like they've been digging themselves in a hole here. They're also in a bit of a hole with their assets in terms of the picks that they've traded out. So if you could offer them, hey, like we can't offer you Khalil Ware, we can't offer you Jaden McDaniels, we can't offer you whoever, Jonathan Kuminga, but we can offer you a get out of jail free card to a degree in terms of you just don't need to take on any other contracts. And now you can use that giant trade exception to go get another player. Like, does Philly want to try and get off Paul George? And maybe they're willing to attach a pick or something, or a couple picks. I don't know. Like they then have some more cap flexibility. And we're seeing a lot of these trades are teams trying to duck the second apron, first apron, trying to improve their financial situation. Like the apron era is very punitive, and there are a lot of financially motivated trades. I would argue more than even before. Now, again, I'm laying out the case for it. I'm not saying I agree with this case. I still think if I was Milwaukee, I would rather have, like, I would look at all the players that are available, all the different trades, right? And I would try to find the sweet spot of 1 to 2 young players I really like and picks, right? And which team can offer that combination of a future starter, or ideally a future star, but like at least a future starter for me, maybe a couple, and then multiple picks. Like that would be my preferred outcome if I'm Milwaukee. If they can't find that, and if Giannis really, like if Giannis comes out and just says, I want to go to a big market, I'm going to New York, Miami, or LA, that puts the Lakers in a group of 3 teams. And I think they can offer something better than what New York can offer, at least. Miami can offer 4 picks, and it just depends how you feel about Ware, Hero, Jaquez, etc. Like some of their younger guys. But I'm laying out the case here. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying I believe it's going to happen. I just think the part that I think people are overlooking is the potential cap relief and flexibility that LA could offer that no one else could really just take on Giannis and not send anything else back. Like salary match. Now, in the offseason, there is some flexibility, right, with the contracts and how much money you could take back. And that's where it does make it more competitive. But I just wanted to at least acknowledge that. DJ Mister, thank you for the super chat. What grade do you give this trade? Luke is an awesome shooter. Plus, who do you see at the buyout market if no trades happen? I'm glad you asked me this because I have been thinking about this trade and what I would give it. I would probably give it probably a B. I would say. I feel like a B for me. Just because I do think there's some real downside here where I don't think Kennard is like in a vacuum. I don't think Kennard is a locked in rotation level player for a contender. I think he's more of a fringe rotation player for a contender. Now, I did not think Gabe was a rotation player for a contender at all, like, you know, or being or close to that. So I think you go from a player who should not be playing to a player who's more of a fringe back end rotation guy. That is an upgrade, but how much of an upgrade I think remains to be seen. Like, I think in the specific area of shooting, it's a giant upgrade, and that carries a lot of the grade for me. I also think, though, for as frustrating as Gabe was and as much as he was targeted, Kennard is an even worse defender than that and can be targeted just as much, if not more. And there is the opportunity cost potentially of the second round pick and what could have been out there this summer, especially if Kennard just like doesn't really fit or doesn't move the needle that much. So I would say a B. I just out of curiosity, I really like and respect Kevin Pelton and his work. I just looked it up. He gave the Lakers a B+, so he's higher on the trade than even I am. He does note that with Kennard making $500,000 less than Gabe, the Lakers save about $1.7 million in the repeater tax. So that is something that is worth noting as well. I guess like my initial thought was like a B-, then I upped it to a B. KP argues a B+. I'm not going to argue with KP. So if you want to argue that, but I'm somewhere in that like B+ range. I don't think it's an A because I think Gabe and Luke are actually a little bit closer than people are maybe acknowledging, right? In terms of, again, like from an advanced metrics perspective and just Kennard, he has an elite skill, but I would argue he's basically below average to like really below average in almost every other facet of the game outside of, I do think he's got some playmaking chops and ball handling chops, not to even the level of Gabe, but just, you know, he can do a little bit more than maybe the typical shooter. So ultimately I would say B. Notorious CRG, thank you for the super chat. Lakers 3-point shooting curse. We'll see if we don't get Kennard back next season. We lost yet another trade asset. I hope this is just a step. Fair. Like this is an unstoppable force meets an immovable object in terms of. Sorry, I just got to be making sure I'm not missing anything here, but. Yeah, we'll see if the 3-point shooting curse, we've seen it with Malik Beasley. We've seen it with different shooters in a Lakers uniform. How does that fare against Luke Kennard's 3-point shooting? I think he's going to shoot the ball well. I think he's going to get great looks and be a real asset off the bench from a shooting and just offensive perspective. But fair to note, they potentially lose another trade asset. I know like a lot of people have been crashing out about them not making a move. So I hope those same people, again, aren't like now flipping this into, well, they made the wrong move or they gave up an asset. It's hard to have both. Like ideally, they traded for me, it was they trade the first for a center or a wing, right? Like that was my hope for the offseason. I knew that was unrealistic and unlikely, but that was still my hope. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but I think them at least adding a player with a real skill and interesting. So Denver is converting Spencer. I mean, that's overdue. Denver converting Spencer Jones from a two-way to official roster spot. But yeah, I think this is a step for now. I think it's a step in the right direction, but I don't know if anything else is happening. Like I would be skeptical of that, unless it's maybe dumping Dalton. Lenny, thank you for the super chat. Feel like a flyer on Zoe should be considered if he clears waivers. His floor is Vando scoring, comparable defense with better hands, playmaking, and IQ. I know people floated out the Zoe. I would push back on one part of this. I do not think he's a comparable defender to Vando. Vando is longer, more athletic, stronger. I think has a higher motor. I do agree with the premise of I like the playmaking and the IQ, and I think he's still an above average to solid defender. I think he has slipped just physically. Like I wanted him last year. I don't think he has been the same player this year. If you look at, he's really like he was on my trade target list last year. This year he has slipped offensively. Some of his numbers are not the same, even comparing them to last year. It does rate out well in defensive box plus minus. So you could argue he's maybe as effective or similarly effective to Vando in a statistical sense. I do think Vando's ceiling is higher. Now, I think he's what I will compliment him in comparison to Vando is less of a mistake prone defender. Like I think one thing that kind of flies under the radar. Wow. Ivica Zubac to the Indiana Pacers. This was something that I was put on my radar last night about like an hour before it started to come out. I think Jake Fisher was the first person to officially report that. And then I think the question now becomes, Kawhi Leonard has to be in the mix here to potentially be moved, but huge trade for the Pacers. Interesting fit because we know they play so fast and up tempo, and Zoo doesn't really fit with that. But I'm really interested to see what the picks are here, because it's just saying does not say what the draft capital is. What a huge trade! Wow. Rami says, "Go get DJJ now." That's once I've heard Kawhi. A couple teams have been looking at Kawhi. We'll see if he gets moved. I think DJJ could potentially be. Now, I think it's going to cost it's going to cost the Lakers a first. That's just what it is. But I would be sniffing around on that. Back to Lenny Hendo. I'm open to Zoe as a flyer. I would prefer Highsmith over Zoe, but point being with Vando, sorry, I got distracted by the Zubac trade. I think Vando's a pretty mistake-prone defender in terms of gambling, losing his man off the ball. He gets beat backdoor a lot for a player with his defensive reputation. So I think Zoe is like a steadier defender. But to your point, he does bring, there's elements of like Marcus, I guess, in there a little bit. He's primarily just a three-point shooter at this stage of his career. I believe last year he had like an insane 3-point rate. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, 80%. So 84% of his shots are threes. So he's basically just a shooter at this point. And the issue is he's shooting 27% on threes. But wow, that's a crazy trade. I'd be open to Zoe. I'd be open to it. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. He said Rob shouldn't build next version of this team on a collective episode, a hold back. Oh, no more negative vibes. Keep up the good work. Broski. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm not sure. Oh, you're talking about Jason. Got it. That was in reference to Jason's point. Got it. Nosferatu says, Jovan, thank you for super chat. Jovan, greetings from Macedonia, brate. This silly Giannis dream just feels like an excuse to not do their job. Also, no confidence in the Luka AR duo. Are you saying you don't have confidence in the Luka AR duo? Or are you saying you think the Lakers don't? Because I know that has been out there in terms of some people saying going for Giannis means the Lakers don't have confidence in Luka and AR. So I just want to clarify that there. I think it's way too early to write off the Luka AR duo, whether you're saying that or whether you're saying you think the Lakers are saying that, which again, I think a lot of people are making that argument. Way too early. If they flame out in the first round and the duo just doesn't fit, totally fair to criticize and question it. And I think at that point, if you're the Lakers, you potentially look for an Austin sign and trade, or you retain him and then look to flip him next season. But we are at least 2.5 months away from that conclusion. So we got a bit to go before writing off the Luka AR duo. I agree to an extent with the Giannis situation. I will note, like, maybe there's an level of Lakers exceptionalism here, but like if any franchise can pull this off in an improbable way, it is the Lakers. They have a 60-year history of pulling superstars out of thin air, most notably, or at least most recently, not most notably, but most recently, Luka, right? With how that all went down. Not saying it's going to happen. Again, I don't think the Lakers are the favorites, or I wouldn't say they're the co-favorites. I don't even know if I would have them in the top three. I really want to see, like, because there's also, it's been out there, Cleveland has been looking into potentially flipping Mobley for Giannis, right? So if Mobley's actually on the table, that's better. I was talking about, if I'm Milwaukee, I'd want to get a blue chip player, a future star. That's a current star. Like, Mobley's better than any player that has been offered for Giannis. Like, I would have to strongly consider that depending on the pick package. Still don't have clarity here on the Zubats. Wild. That's a wild trade. But yeah, I mean, look, I'll say this. For the people who think this is just an excuse and sort of a filibuster for LA to stall until the offseason, and like, they'll either get Giannis or they won't. And if they don't get Giannis, they better nail the rest of the offseason. And if they don't get the restricted free agent, if they don't trade for anybody, if they don't improve the starting group, then it's time to hold feet to the fire, and it's time to really put pressure on this front office and the organization as to the continual inability to execute their plan and their vision, and sort of selling a certain plan in the offseason for the next season, or selling a certain plan at the deadline and then being unable to follow through on that. So trust me, they're not going to skate with this one. If they don't get Giannis and they don't make a big move this offseason, I think they're going to have a certain reaction from, I think, the fan base, certainly, but also the media, of like, at some point you can't keep kicking the can down the road and selling a fantasy in terms of like what the team is going to look like. You got to go do it. And I would argue, I think this is something that's sort of flown under the radar with the Lakers and their off seasons. I would say the last really good off season the Lakers have had was 2019. And that's a long time ago. If you want to potentially argue 2020, I think it didn't age well with the moves that they made. But at the time, okay, you had Dennis, you had Mark, you had Trez. Like, as I'm saying it out loud, I don't like love the 2020 offseason, and they shifted away from their 2020 identity and what won the title into a more offensive approach and skill-based approach. Didn't work out. We don't know what would have happened if AD stayed healthy in that 2021 season, or postseason, but didn't have a good 2021 offseason. I mean, certainly that was a worst offseason that they've had maybe ever. 2022 was not good. 2023 was not good. 2024 was not good. 2025 was, I would say, like decent. My biggest issue with the 2025 offseason is that people were parading the signings they made. And it was like, yeah, for the, like they had limited assets in terms of free agency to add players. They did that, but they could have made a trade. They could have put the first on the table. They could have tried to build a roster that they wanted for this season in the summer. They did not do that. So I would say that the 2019 offseason was like a 10. I mean, 10, you got AD. So I would say that was a 10 offseason. This past offseason, I would say, for being generous, was like a 5.5, maybe 6. Let's just say 7 is like a good offseason, 7.5. They've only had one of those dating back to 2019. They need another one this summer. If they do not have at least like a 7 offseason, if not even ideally higher, it's ripe for a lot of criticism and a lot of, is this the right front office to be leading this? Your boy Rich, thank you for the super chat. Does this give more opportunity to Bronny? Seems to be getting better, but Gabe was in the way. I do not think this gives more opportunity to Bronny. I think Luke Kennard slides into the Gabe Vincent spot, and I don't see Bronny having a rotation opportunity this season. I think even with how the rotation has been, Dalton and Maxey are even ahead of Bronny, right? Like Bronny has had a couple of games when the Lakers have been really depleted where he's been a rotation player. But if we're talking like, even for as bad as Dalton has played and as down as JJ has been on him, he is still ahead of Bronny in the rotation pecking order. So I would say Bronny right now is 13th, and the only reason he's not 14th is because Adu Thero is out. If Adu Thero is back, I think Bronny would be 14th in the pecking order. So I don't see this changing Bronny's role in any meaningful way. Sorry, just catching up. All right. Christian, thank you for the super chat. Rui and Maxey for Wiggins. Will that work? It works financially. I don't. That's not enough for Miami. You would need to attach the first. Miami might not even do that if you attach the first. But it's not like Wiggins is a much better player than. He's just a better player than Rui, and Maxey doesn't swing that at all. So you would be offering financial relief, but they want to flip Wiggins for an asset. The Billy, thank you for the super chat. Luke making momentum swinging shots would help. Yes, I think that's a good, like, I think I forget who I was talking to. I think it was Kobe at the, Kobe Price at the Knicks game, because we were sitting next to each other, and we started highlighting, of course, like the supporting cast really struggling, but there were several shots and moments in that game where the Lakers had that first half lead, and then they were trying to make the second half comeback, and there just would be swings where guys are missing wide open corner threes or just open threes, semi-open threes. And if you put Luke Kennard in that position, I think he's gonna statistically makes half of them, over half of them, at nearly 52% on open threes. So I think the momentum shots could be a big thing. I think the biggest question is just like, how much can the Lakers afford to play a defensive liability when their three best players are, let's just say, limited defensively to some degree, right? You have a certain ceiling and a certain floor if you're playing the big three together, or even sometimes if you're playing two of them together, to the point of if you add another defensive liability out there. Like I think this trade raises the Lakers' ceiling and floor offensively, and it gets them more into that. Can they be a top 5 offense? Can they be a top 3 offense? But it also adds again, for as bad as Gabe was, and that was reflected in the on-off with defensive rating, and just the Lakers would defend terribly with Gabe on the floor. Luke is a worse defender than Gabe, and Luke, I guess he's not as small, so maybe you're not shooting over him as easily. But Gabe is stronger than him. I think Gabe is quicker than him from a defensive perspective. So, and Gabe had a defensive reputation for a little bit. Luke Kennard has never had a defensive reputation. I just think it also lowers, I would say, the floor defensively and potentially the ceiling defensively, which already the Lakers were in the basement from a defensive perspective. But yeah, the momentum shots will be big. I just ultimately view him as more like a 15 to 18 minute player. So I think there's a little bit of a cap there. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for being a member for a couple months. Last one, CP3, no real playing time, but kind of sad. This is the end. From a sentimental standpoint, I would welcome it. And you got the Banana Boat reunion, but we just talked about a couple players in Haywood Highsmith and Lonzo Ball, who I think could have a shot at potentially helping the Lakers a little bit. I think both guys would be in that 10th, 11th zone of the rotation. And Highsmith maybe could play his way into a slightly larger role. I think Lonzo's more of a fringe rotation guy, but we haven't seen Highsmith, so there's some uncertainty there. But I don't see CP3 being a rotation guy. So I would say if all of the buyout / waived guys go and CP3 is the last thing. But even then, I'm I'd rather just have Kobe Buffkin. I'd probably rather even have Nick Smith Jr. on the roster. But I would certainly rather have Kobe Buffkin and Drew Timme. So yeah, it's I'd probably say no. I skip out on multiple first round picks and Benedict Mathurin. Wow. I mean, hey, I think Zoo's that guy. To me, he's at least a top 7, if not top 5 center. Alvin 28, thank you for the super chat. Anyone on waivers or upgrade from the 2A guys? I've not heard anything yet. The Lakers are still, they got 30 minutes here to flip Dalton. So I think that will ultimately determine which direction they go in with the back end of the roster. But I would say Highsmith, Lonzo are 2 names to watch on the buyout / free agent market. And then Kobe Buffkin, I lump him in with the 2A guys. He was a 10-day guy technically, so he's a free agent, but Kobe Buffkin, Drew Timme are a couple of other names to watch. So, I mean, Kobe Buffkin continues to crush it in the G League for South Bay, and he just had a game with, I believe, 41, 8 and 8. I don't get what they were doing with the 10-day situation. I think they botched that. They played him. He played well, and then they just stopped playing him. I don't get it, but yeah, I think those would be some names to watch. Benedict Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for Zubats and Kobe Brown. That is the final package. Yeah, that seems about fair. So the Clippers are in full teardown mode now. Wonder if Kawhi gets flipped here in the next 30. Norma Maldonado Buha, a.k.a. Mama Buha. Thank you for the super chat. I'm not too knowledgeable about caps. I assume you mean cap space, but we'll just say cap here. But since the new owners have deep pockets, can't they spend more money to get good players? Yes, to a degree. There is a salary cap in place in the NBA, unlike in baseball, for example, where it does come down to your ownership's deep pockets and how much they're willing to spend to a degree. With the NBA, you got the salary cap, you got the first apron, second apron. I'm not going to get too into all the complexities with that, but there are punitive measures in place to prevent, because if this were the case, then like Steve Ballmer would just, we know what well, I'm not going to go there, but there'd be a lot of trees being planted, and the Clippers would have an incredible team in terms of players with the highest cap figures in the league. But where it helps, like you can spend into the luxury tax more with a richer ownership group, a wealthier ownership group. You can spend, you're more willing to eat the tax bill, the repeater tax. There is a limitation there. You look at Golden State, you look at the Clippers, like there are limits to what even the richer groups will spend, but it is a competitive advantage. I think the bigger competitive advantage is the rest of everything in terms of there's no salary cap for coaches. There's no salary cap for front office. There's no salary cap for player development and scouts and analytics and all those things. So that's where I would like to see the Lakers really revamp everything and invest a ton of money in the front office and basketball ops and really build that out to be top notch, as competitive, if not more competitive than any other franchise in the NBA. Like they need to be, I think there's been some improvement and things are much better than they were 5 years ago, much better than they were 10 years ago, but they're still not at the top of the top. And that should be the goal here. Uh, 2026 first round pick from the Pacers, protected 1 through 4 and 10 through 30, which means it only converts if it's 5 through 9. That's a really interesting. Then 2029 Pacers first rounder. That's a really, I mean, that's a weird. That's really weird. I don't know if I've ever seen a pick protected 1 through 4 and 10 through 30. So the Pacers basically say, like, unless if we get screwed in the lottery, you get the first. If we don't, you don't get the first. So that first might not. It's really at the core. It's more so Mathurin and a first for Zubats, which actually is kind of low for Zubats. I'm not the biggest Mathurin guy, but. All right. Any questions that you guys have here? I'm going to go live probably until about 12:30 Pacific time. So we got an hour here to just chill and Hans De Leon asks, what does it mean protected? I don't have knowledge about that. So, a protected pick means that, like, typically you'll see a protection if it'll be 1 through 4, 1 through 5, maybe 1 through 10, or lottery protected. But protected means you're only trading a portion of the pick and part of the pick is protected. So, for example, the Lakers, as part of the Westbrook trade, gave up that 2027 pick, but it's 1 through 4 protected. So Utah actually just flipped it to Memphis. But what that means is if the Lakers 2027 pick falls in the top 4 picks, they get the pick, they retain it. If it falls between picks 5 and 30, the pick gets routed out to the team that owns the rights to the pick. So there's a difference between, like, it's relatively simple, but like, unprotected pick is just regardless of where the pick falls, that pick is being converted to the team that owns the pick. I don't want to get too complicated, but like sometimes you have a team that has like the rights to multiple like the best of multiple picks or something. But like in general, we'll just say unprotected pick means no restrictions on the pick. 1 through 30, it gets, like, the team either keeps it, or if they're trading it, it goes to whichever team. Protected means you are blocking off portions of the pick for yourself. So in this Indiana case, if the pick is 1 through 4, falls 1 through 4 in the draft, Indiana keeps it. If it's 5 through 9, the Clippers get it. If it's 10 to 30, Indiana keeps it. So there's really only 5 potential outcomes where the Clippers would get the pick. Otherwise, Indiana's keeping it. So that's a heavily protected first round pick. But more traditionally, you'll see the 1 through 4, like the Lakers did it. You'll see lottery protected, which just means if it's lottery, the team keeps it. If it's not, the team trades it, or you'll see unprotected. And of course, unprotected picks are far more valuable. Jeff Goo, thank you for the super chat. Chances get 80 back and keep Braun this summer. I would put those chances at low. I don't think, well, for a variety of reasons, right? So 80, pulling up his contract, it's a big contract. 54.1 this year, 58.5 next year, 62.8 player option in 2027-28, which I assume he will pick up unless he ends up signing an extension, which case maybe it's at a lower number or something. He opts out and extends for less, but long-term security. I will say this, like, I don't think there's I don't think there's like bad feelings necessarily from the 80 side, but he was traded without a heads up to Dallas, and part like an ancillary reason why the Lakers traded AD. Of course, Luka's available. Like, it's a no brainer. You do that trade every time, but the Lakers were not thrilled at the prospect of signing or extending AD with his injury history and his contract situation and him wanting a max extension. So I just don't think it is financially feasible. And with Washington didn't give up like an insane amount for AD, but it does seem like Washington is trying to expedite their rebuild a little bit and remain competitive with some damaged good star assets in AD and Trae Young. So my understanding is Washington wants to keep him, at least for right now. I assume if they had a certain offer, they would be willing to flip AD, but I don't see an AD Lakers reunion. Jay Spares asks, who's had the best trade cycle so far? That is a really good question. In general, I think the most underrated move so far has been Ayo DeSumo to Minnesota. I love that move for Minnesota. They didn't give up a first. They gave up 4 seconds, which is a lot, but I really like Ayo DeSumo, and I think he's immediately their second best bench player, top 7 player on the team. Hits at a big weakness. Like, is a different player than Nah, but I think, and Nah has obviously taken a leap in Atlanta. So it's always tough when a player like leaves and takes a leap and then you compare another player as their replacement. But like, I think this version of Ayo is a pretty comparable player in terms of impact to last year's version of Nah. You could argue might even be better than last year's version of Nah, like not this year's version of Nah, but last year's. And so I think Minnesota picking up Ayo is a huge pickup, and I really did not like their bench outside. I mean, I like the top 6. I did not really like anybody outside of that, and or didn't really trust. There's some guy like Shannon and Clark. Like I like some of those guys, but I didn't really trust any of them. And I trust Ayo. And I think Ayo was a pickup for like some smart team was going to pick him up, and Minnesota ended up doing that. So I really like that pickup for Minnesota. I really like the Jared McCain pickup for OKC. First time OKC traded a first-round pick for a player since 2015. So Sam Presti is the best executive doing it. And if he identifies you being worth a first-round pick and worth investing in to the degree that OKC did with McCain, I think that's a huge vote of confidence for Jared McCain and just his potential role there with OKC. And then I would also, I do like what Cleveland did. Like they are in win now mode with Donovan Mitchell and trying to appease him and go on a deep playoff run. So if you look at James Harden is having a better season than Darius Garland. I think he is better than Darius Garland like currently. He's also available, and Garland's been dealing with a lot of injury concerns. So that deal was solid. They got off Lonzo. They added Keon, like a big Keon Ellis fan. You guys know that. So I would say adding Keon Ellis, James Harden, and Dennis Schroeder for Darius Garland, Lonzo Ball, and why am I blanking on? There's been so many trades that I'm already blanking on who they gave up for in the Schroeder. Wow. They gave up DeAndre Hunter. Yeah. So flipping Hunter, Lonzo, and Garland for Harden, Ellis, and Schroeder, I think is a net positive for Cleveland. So I would say I really like what OKC, Minnesota, and Cleveland have done. I think the Clippers have gotten some interesting returns on their players. Like they're clearly headed. So they flipped Harden and Zubats for Garland, Mathurin, a couple firsts, although one heavily protected one, and then, some seconds. That's, I guess, interesting. Then I do like what Utah, I like that Utah's at least like trying to do something. I like Chicago taking on Jaden Ivey. I don't like anything else Chicago's done, but they got Dillingham too. They have a million guards, but New York getting Jose Alvarado, I think will help, especially with this Miles McBride injury that he's going to be out for a while, potentially into the playoffs. I didn't really get the Kuminga trade for Atlanta. I think there's a lot of overlap with Jalen Johnson. So yeah, I would say in general, some of my favorite, I would say OKC, Minnesota, Cleveland, and part of what Chicago's done, not all of what Chicago's done. And I think Memphis selling Jackson and getting the 3 firsts. And also Utah, I think that they've just been stuck in a situation where they were rebuilding, but the rebuild was going nowhere and they needed to cash in at some point, and they finally cashed in. So those are some of my favorite ones. DS4, thank you for the super chat. Could LA get in on a Clippers deal? DJJ. Potentially. I have not gotten any word of that right now. I'm just checking my texts. But what I will know is in general, those two teams or organizations have rarely traded with one another. I think there is, as silly as it might sound, something to trading with a team in your same city. And I think the asking price is going to be high. And if you're the Lakers, I really like DJJ. I would like to fit. I'd be way more okay with it if it was a lottery protected first rather than a just unprotected first. But I think the Lakers' ambitions are higher than DJJ. And I know everyone hears that and they think Giannis immediately, which yes, that's a part of it. But I think even looking at guys like an Eason or a Watson or potentially, a Dort or something, I think you could argue those guys above DJJ. I probably would. I might like him a little bit more than Dort, to be completely honest, but it's debatable. And I think most people would have Dort ahead of him. So I think the Lakers have higher ambitions. And so they could theoretically, I think if they offered the first, or a protected first, but all indications are they want to keep their cap sheet as clean as possible. Connor, thank you for the super chat. Walk with me here. Giannis tells the Bucks he only wants to go to the Lakers this summer. AR tells the Bucks he will not sign with them. What happens? I will walk with you because I I don't know that the Lakers are going to be the only team Giannis puts on the list, but I could see the Lakers being, if Giannis has a list of 3 to 4 teams, I could easily see the Lakers being one of those 3 to 4 teams, and that at least giving them something of a competitive advantage compared to other teams. And like that's the risk here from the Milwaukee side is that, yes, if you take it to the summer, you're going to have more players, potential players in the mix in terms of trade partners, because Miami goes from 2 picks to 4 picks. Knicks go from 0 picks to 2 picks. Lakers go from 1 pick to 2 picks plus an asterisk pick, we'll say. And like other teams have more flexibility and whatnot. But the issue is now the part of the appeal with trading for Giannis now would be getting him for 2 playoff runs before his potential extension, or like going into his extension, of getting him in now, getting this playoff run, then next year, another season, another playoff run. And then he's got his contract situation. If you trade for him in the summer, like trading for him in the summer in the offseason now, you have less time with him. You have less time to sell him on your franchise. And there is a possibility that you could just trade for him. He stays for a year and dips. Like, I think it's likely that whatever team trades for him likely retains him and he's there for the long haul, but it's far from a guarantee. And if he goes to Miami and it's like a disaster season, or they lose in round 1, or he goes to New York and it doesn't work because they had to gut their roster or like whatever, there is a chance that he could dip. And he seems to be realizing that the end of his prime is near and he wants to rack up more championships. So there's just a lot more risk in terms of trading for him, I think, in the offseason and having a shorter window with him. So I do think that gives Giannis a little bit more say and leeway, and he can position it where I only want 3 or 4 teams, and if I don't go to one of those teams, I'm leaving in a year, and you guys gave up all this for nothing. Now, I do think, depending on Austin's financial situation, I think in a vacuum, he would probably say no to going to Milwaukee. But as I mentioned, some of the teams with cap space or projected cap space have lost that cap space. So maybe it is a little bit of a tighter market for Austin, which could help the Lakers. In that case, what happens? I mean, I already talked about this earlier. You might have missed it, but I think what happens is the Lakers try to sell Milwaukee on, we give you the 3 picks. You either create a giant trade exception, or we expand this into a 3-team trade where a team sends you a contract that they don't want. They attach assets to it, and we're giving you the 3 firsts. We're absorbing Giannis into the cap space, and then Team X is dumping player Y onto you, and they're attaching a first and a second, a first and a couple seconds, maybe a couple firsts, depending on the player, depending on the contract. And like Milwaukee is not going to be competitive for a while. This is going to be a long rebuilding process. They have the Dame contract as an anchor on their cap sheet for the foreseeable future. So I think the way this works is Milwaukee has to be underwhelmed by the offers from a player's perspective and just be like, we really don't like Tyler Hero that much. We really don't like Khalil Ware that much. We really don't like Karl Anthony Towns that much. Go down the list of like Mobley's interest. Mobley, I think they would have to really consider that. But like there is a path, I guess, to them just being underwhelmed by some of these offers from a player perspective and being like, there's a couple teams that could offer 4 picks, but if the Lakers are offering 3 picks and they don't like any of the other players, and there is like but again, the Lakers can maybe find a third team to throw in more assets. That's where I think the Lakers get in the mix from like an offer perspective, but it is a little pie in the sky. I'm not denying that. And again, I'm not saying the Lakers are the favorites or even the co-favorites, but I think that's how that potentially plays out. Otherwise, like if Giannis says the Lakers are the only team that he wants to go to, I think it's going to happen. I just doubt that he makes it that definitive, because again, the only all that's been reported in terms of Giannis's interests have been last season, he had interest in going to New York. And then there's been various reports on he was open to Miami. He was open to Minnesota. He was open to Golden State. Then he wasn't open to Golden State. But there's been no Lakers in that in terms of his actual interest in going to the Lakers, right? So I assume the Lakers are back channeling some of this stuff and getting a sense, but we'll see. Hadrian, thank you for the super chat. If the 2026 pick doesn't convey, Clippers will receive the Pacers unprotected 2031 first pick as a substitute. Appreciate you adding that in here. I had not seen that yet. There it is. Okay. I see Shams tweeted that 17 minutes ago. Converts to 2031. So they got, I think that's a pretty fair trade then. They got 2 firsts for Zoo. Yeah. So I like what the Clippers did. Like they weren't going anywhere. It was time to rebuild. Connor says, I think the Bucks were posturing this cycle. Certainly possible. I mean, that's the way it seems. A lot of the buzz that had been out there was that they were never seriously trying to trade Giannis, and they just wanted to see what the market was, wanted to see what the offers were, and had to be blown away. I think objectively it made more sense to trade him in the offseason in terms of just having the most competition for him and the possibility to not take back some unwanted money, but we'll see how it plays out. I will note too that there's been a couple of reports, and I'm not exactly where these are from, so I don't take everything with a relative grain of salt, but there's been a couple of reports that teams have said that they've gotten the sense that Giannis didn't want to go. Like, it sounds like that might have been a factor with Golden State, for example, that Giannis didn't want to go there because he knew he would always be the number 2 behind Steph, even if he technically is the better player and more of like the number 1 in terms of actual production and value and all that stuff. So I wonder how that potentially affects his interest in the Lakers, just because I think Luka and Giannis are close in terms of production and value. And I think they're both top 4 players, and a lot of people have them 3 and 4 in some order. But Luka now has been entrenched as the face of the Lakers for a year. He is the face of the Lakers moving forward. So, and he's 5 years younger than Giannis. So it's like Giannis would be coming to Luka's team, and for some players that matters, for some players it doesn't, right? And sometimes that's more of a media narrative in terms of like whose team it is or whatnot. But there is like, we could look at like Kevin Durant in Golden State, right? And part of it was he joined a 73-9 team that had just won a title and then lost in the finals. But like, he never got the full credit that he felt he deserved, because it was always, well, he joined that team, it was Steph's team, etc. And fair or not, those narratives do hold some weight, right? And when we talk about legacies and what a player accomplished, there is all, like, even you look at Kobe, and for some people, Kobe was never able to, like, people point to the first three-peat and be like, well, Shaq got all the finals MVPs, and like that's been held against Kobe, right? And LeBron going to Miami, some people have held that against him, and like, oh, he had to join the super team and Wade and all that. So there's always going to be things that factor into legacy and narrative and how people talk and view these things. But I will note there's been a couple reports out there that people have gotten the sense that like Giannis wants to go more to a situation where he's the clear number 1 and is not joining another player's team. That would obviously work against the Lakers, but I also don't know how much to take away from that, if anything at all. Alder Rizzi asks if I could find time to talk about Jeremy Sohan. To me, Jeremy Sohan is a similar player to Vando. And as long as Vando's on the Lakers, I don't. So, I mean, expiring contract, I guess, I mean, you could do Maxey and save some money. I don't know if the Spurs could even do that. Dalton, you couldn't do because you'd be taking on money and taking on too much money. I'm fine with Sohan in like theory, but he is more of I think fringe rotation guy. And also with Vando, I just think there's too much overlap there of like defensive players with really glaring offensive limitations. So if the Lakers, if the Lakers got off the Vando contract, I would be open to Sohan being a potential replacement of that player archetype. But I think it's really hard to have two of those guys in your rotation. Easy peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Give Bufkin a proper look. Look good on the for Lakers guard. Anyway, I agree. I said it earlier. I thought they mismanaged his 10-day contract. He was solid in the 3 games he played in or whatever, and particularly on D, but also the athleticism, getting downhill, the confidence that he played with, the assertiveness that he played with. I think even more so, like in comparison with Nick Smith Jr. and Dalton Connect, who I think are a couple of guys on his corner, so to speak. I would give Bufkin a proper look. We got all right. Chris Haynes shuts down the potential Kawhi trade. We got 4 minutes here until the deadline. I don't think the Lakers are doing anything, but we'll see. Anso asked about potential buyout candidates. I'd keep an eye on Haywood Highsmith and Lonzo Ball, but Highsmith is more so the guy you need. Giancarlo asks, how realistic / difficult would it be to steal 2 restricted free agents this summer, and who would you target? I think it's very unrealistic to steal 2 and very difficult to steal 2. I think it's possible to steal 1, but you probably have to overpay, and depending on how much cap space the Lakers can clear up, on the high side, somewhere between 50 to 60. 60 would be on the high end. You can fit a couple of these guys in terms of, I think the 3 guys that stand out to me are Walker Kessler, Peyton Watson, and Tari Eason. I think I would prioritize them in that order. But I think all 3 guys are going to go for 20 plus million. And so you could theoretically add 2 of the 3 in restricted free agency, and depending on the ultimate price, have those teams not match. But I think in all 3 scenarios, you probably have to overpay by at least a few million, if not maybe like 5 to 7 million from like an annual value perspective. And there is a cost to overpaying players, right? Where, okay, you landed Walker Kessler and Peyton Watson, and I think both those guys would be great and would help a lot, especially as like a 4-5 tandem. And if even in that case, let's just say, they'd still potentially have, if they use cap space, that does affect the exception access that they have. But like, let's just say for one of the exceptions, they could add another wing, 2-way guy. They get a bargain. So maybe you have like Kessler, Watson, that player, or maybe you're still starting Marcus again. And then, but that also depends on, is Marcus still on the team? Did he opt in? Like there's just so many variables with their contracts. It's officially 12 o'clock. I would say it's very unlikely to get 2. I would say it's unlikely to get even 1, but I think 1 is possible. You just probably have to overpay. But then there are downsides to overpaying, just because, again, that limits. You don't really, like, ideally you don't want to overpay players, just because you want as many contracts at the value of the player or even below the value of the player, because that's how you put together a championship team. Is like the collective is like greater than the sum of the salary, in theory, right? Like you don't necessarily need that. You just need a lot of good contracts for a championship team. So I would say it's unlikely that they do 2, but I think it's certainly possible to do 1. And then maybe you could also trade for someone with attaching a pick or 2 to acquire another starter. But I think it's an ambitious goal because if I'm everything that's been out there, Utah wants to keep Kessler, try out this triple big front court. Houston has been high on Tari Eason for a long time in terms of like keeping him out of trades and whatnot. And then it more so sounds like Denver's going to have to flip, I think, Cam Johnson to keep Peyton Watson. And he has really risen up their player hierarchy. And like, I think they're going to do everything they can to keep Peyton Watson. So I would say there's probably some restricted free agents I'm missing. Let's see. Looking at the 2026, I mean, we could just go through it here quickly. Well, let's go through the restricted free agents first. Jaden Ivey, Mathurin, Sohan, Duran. Duran is not like Ivey's interesting, but Chicago just traded for him and doesn't really not what the Lakers need. Mathurin is interesting, but the Clippers just acquired him, and I think they're going to retain him. Jalen Duren is not going to be available. You could spin the block on Mark Williams, but he's played well in Phoenix. Tari Eason, I think it's unlikely, and that's one that I think he's probably the most gettable. I think he's more gettable than Peyton Watson and Walker Kessler, but that's also one that you're going to have to overpay. And like, if he's worth $20 million, you're going to have to pay 25, 26. If he's worth $22 million, you're going to have to pay 27, 28. It's just that's not a spot you want to necessarily be in. Kessler, Watson. I like Jamal Shed, but that's, as a bench player. And yeah, I mean, so we've gone through pretty much the top restricted free agents there. It's not the craziest group. And again, maybe one of those guys is gettable. And then you get to the unrestricted free agents, and it's like, okay, LeBron, CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, Porzingis. I like Porzingis as a potential exception player. Tobias Harris, Anthony Simons, John Collins, Rozier, Vucevic, Norm Powell. I mean, it's not a Rui, Herder, Mitchell Robinson, Rob Williams, Kobe White, Mo Wagner, Grimes. Like, it's just not Io, Cam Thomas. It's not a great list. Like, a lot of these guys are either bench players or don't fit what the Lakers need with the starters and with around Luka and Austin. Like, I like Mitchell Robinson. I think he's more of a backup big, especially with his injury concerns. And like, he's not a Luka center. He's not the above the rim lob threat. He's more of like, he and Steven Adams are just the two backup bigs that come in and change the complexion of a game with their strength and size and offensive rebounding. Grimes, I don't think, I've been on the record, I don't think is like the ideal fit with Luka and Austin. To me, he's more of a bench guy with that group. And it seems like Philly traded McCain to keep Grimes. Porzingis, I like at a certain price, and if he can prove to be healthy, although Golden State just flipped Kuminga for him, so that be a bit of a disaster if they did that and then lost Porzingis. And then Norm Powell, I mean, I think, again, not the best fit with Austin and Luka. So you just go through like the top free agents. It's a lot of defensively challenged big men. It's a lot of older players. It's a lot of defensively challenged wings and guards. Like, there's not a lot of two-way studs in unrestricted free agency. Lakers are going to have to identify their version of a Spencer Jones or someone like that. But yeah, it's not a great, I mean, Keon Ellis is all the way down there, who I would be very open to if you could swing it. Dominic Barlow, Jordan Goodwin. There's some interesting guys, but not really as starters. So yeah, I mean, the Lakers are just in a bit of a predicament here. Andre Miller, thank you for the super chat. Rob crashed Crypto Arena today. with a angry expletive emoji. I get it. Look, you guys know how I felt about this deadline and how I felt about the lack of moves with this organization and this front office for a while now. They had sat out what I would say was 4 of the last 5 trade cycles. Now they did make a trade this trade cycle, so I will at least acknowledge the attempt to improve the roster and actually put some skin in the game and some assets on the game. We've also talked about the downside of this and the opportunity cost and how much it actually makes a difference. We this whole time we've been talking about like Nick Claxton and Herb Jones and Jared Allen and Andrew Wiggins. Like Luke Kennard is a much different player and nowhere near like that caliber of player. And of course the Lakers' cost was much lower with Gabe in a second, but like I think ideally they added a difference maker, a starter, a game changer. That didn't happen. And I totally understand the fan frustration. I feel like some people who are covering the team or talking about the team are a little head in the sand with what's going on and ignoring some of the obvious concerns with how things have been going for a while. And that's not me. I see it. Xavier, thank you for the super chat. Is Rob on the clock if we don't acquire Giannis? I don't think so. I've continued to say my understanding is Rob is in good standing, and now maybe I don't want to pretend to know the Mark Walter playbook. It's obviously a new ownership change and some new advisors advising him, and it's going to be a new regime. So I don't want to. I can't sit here and pretend to know or say I know with clarity that what exactly they're going to do this offseason in terms of with Rob and how like the disaster scenario of not landing Giannis, not landing some high level starters. But what I have heard and continue to hear is that he was obviously given the extension. The Luka trade earned him a lot of goodwill internally. And remember, Mark Walter, it's not like Mark Walter is coming in blind. He was a part of the ownership group previously. He was just a minority owner. And he also, they were in the process of purchasing the team when Rob was given the extension. I've made this point several times. Like, you're not giving Rob that extension without the heads up and blessing of Mark Walter. So I don't think he's on the clock. I think he's going to be on the clock with the fan base. I think he's already probably on the clock with the fan base, and will certainly face a lot of criticism from me if he does not land. I'm not going to say if he doesn't land Giannis, but if the team is not much better than it currently is going into next season, there will be a lot of criticism on this block. But we'll see. The more we know. Thank you for the super chat. What buyout candidates do you think the Lakers could possibly go for? My top candidate would be Haywood Highsmith, but it depends who else is out there. I think Lonzo's interesting. But I would say if you kind of get beyond those two, I think you go into the Kobe Buffkin, Drew Timme zone of buyout candidates, or not buyout candidates, but two-way player and Timme free agent. Easy peasy. John Collins on an exception would be nice. I wouldn't mind John Collins. I think it depends on the makeup of the front court. Like, for example, if it's DeAndre Ayton at center, I do not like that. I do not like that as a 4-5 defensive tandem. I think John Collins, he's kind of similar to Rui for me in a way where ideally he's your worst front court defender. So when he's playing next to Ivica Zubac and Kawhi Leonard, okay, I like that a lot more. When he's playing next to DeAndre Ayton and Marcus Smart, DeAndre Ayton and Luka Doncic, DeAndre Ayton and LeBron James, again, like different variations of what the Lakers starters could potentially look like. That's a different story. So I think if it's Walker Kessler and Peyton Watson, sure, I like that a lot more. If it's the current group, I don't love the fit, and I think there's some overlap. Like, he's more of a big man than Rui, and he's developed into being a good shooter. He's very athletic. He's a good rebounder. So he helps with like certain areas for sure. I just think you need a good defensive five next to him. Ryan Mitchell, you can't let Maxi expire. Rob needs to go. I mean, they let Maxi and Rui expire, and I do wonder what the future is of both those guys. Does Rui end up getting extended or re-signed? Does Maxi end up re-signing as like a minimum guy just because of the Luka relationship? I'm not sure. Joe, thank you for the super chat. Could have at least assisted Dalton a solid. I think that would have required someone wanting to take on Dalton, to be completely honest. Like I know there are some within the fan base that are still high on Dalton, and his 37-point performance against a tanking Utah team will live on forever in the stuff of legend. But I mean, we'll see, like, all it takes is I guess the right situation and opportunity for him. But I think I've said this before. I think Dalton right now is on the JHS path of being on his way out of the NBA. Maybe some team will give him a flyer as like a minimum guy in the future, but he's already in his mid 20s. Like I made the point before, he's 2 years older than Max Christie. Like, just think about that and think about Max is already in his 5th year, right? Dalton's in his 2nd year. Like, it's just, and I would argue he was better last year than this year. I don't know one thing he's necessarily better at this season than he was at last season. Maybe the rebounding a little bit. There's been like a little bit of strides defensively from like unplayable to like still kind of unplayable. But yeah, I mean, I also think there wasn't much of a market for him. SC Lakers, thank you for the super chat. Lakers 26-27 champs, have patience. I like the optimism on a day that there's a lot of pessimism from the fan base, and totally understand it, but there's some optimism here. And I hope the SC stands for what I think it does. Let me... hold on. Oh, Cam Thomas has been waived. That's wild. Yeah, I mean, Lakers do not need another offensive-minded player who doesn't play defense, but would not, based on their track record of prioritizing combo guards who don't defend, would not be surprised if he ends up on the Lakers. Like, in all seriousness, he could have some value as like a 6-man scorer, but then you really have to be careful with the lineups you play Cam Thomas in, because he does not play defense and he calls his own number at a very high rate and is also not very efficient. Normal Maldonado Buha, thank you for the super chat. Mama Buha. I feel bad for the older players. 30s being treated like they have little worth. That's got to hurt. But hey, they made the NBA. Yeah, I mean, look, this is a ruthless business, and these guys are making millions of dollars. So there's, of course, the human element to it. But they are, I mean, this is sport. This is meritocracy. This is, you are your body to a degree, right? I mean, combination of mental and physical, and I guess for some players emotional. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the way the NBA is trended, where it's interesting because there are a lot of stars and even some role players who are able to play into their late 30s at a very high level, but it is a young man's game, and ideally you're in your mid to late 20s. Musel K 420. Terrible deadline for LA. West is wide open because of injuries to the top teams. They better do something in summer, but the problem is there's no Nico, though. I said I think I gave the Kennard trade a B. That would be that move specifically. I think if I evaluated the deadline overall, I would probably give LA... a C plus. I mean, if you look at what was actually traded and the prices for some of these guys, I don't really see like, look, and I'm not, you guys know I'm not defending the front office. And I think they could have been in the mix for some guys if they put the first act like truly on the table. But looking at some of the guys that have been flipped, I don't really see who the player or players were that LA could have gotten either with their first or with the second instead of Kennard. So like, I think it was a fine deadline. Like, you know, I don't know. I'm somewhere around like a C or so, C plus. I don't know. I go back and forth. To be honest, I'm somewhere in the C range. Like the move itself, you know, in a vacuum, I get the Kennard move and see the upside, but certainly you would have liked to have seen them add a starter. I just don't know. Again, looking at the moves, like who that was. I mean, like I would have liked Agbaji. That's a player I would have liked. And it seems like he might have been in the mix for a second, but yeah. Goat Bear, thank you for the super chat. Rob better not lose Rui for nothing. Could be, well, yeah. I mean, I there's three ways it plays out, right? He either extends or resigns, he leaves for nothing, or it's a sign and trade, or I guess he could be signed and then traded later. So I guess there's four potential ways. But yeah, I mean, with Rui, it's going to potentially come down to just what else is out there. Like if you can get Peyton Watson and you have to rescind the rights to Rui to do so, I think you do that. If it's the Giannis trade and you need to make room, you do that. But if you lose him for nothing and don't replace him or don't really upgrade the team, that's of course a disaster and an asset mismanagement. So I think it's hard. I agree with the premise of this. I just think it's depends on like what the alternatives are. J-Dub, I appreciate the super chat. I do not see a question. If you could drop it in the chat, I will do my best to answer it. Tan Man, can the Lakers get Cam Thomas? He just got waived. Yeah. So I just touched on that. Thank you for the super chat. I believe so, if I'm not mistaken, because they're not a first apron team. There's no restrictions with them signing a player to taxpayer or for first and second apron teams. You can't sign a guy making more than the non-taxpayer MLE who's waived as a buyout guy. The Lakers are not a first apron team, so they can. So yes, they can sign Cam Thomas. That one, I'm just not a Cam Thomas guy, and I think he's a very unserious player. That's like the kindest way to put it. I don't think he has a winning mindset or plays a winning style of basketball, or he screams like a me first type of player. But I guess from like a talent perspective, he's better than the back end of the Lakers roster. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Looking what Zubats went for 3 firsts is not even enough for Jaden McDaniels, let alone Giannis. Rob, stop. The price is high. BS. Atlanta got Jock averaging 11 and 6 for cash. Zubats didn't go for 3 firsts. He went for 2 firsts, but 2 firsts and what I believe a second or two. But then, yeah, Jaden McDaniels, I think Jaden McDaniels would go for at least 2 firsts, if not 3. And again, with the honest talk, the only path I see is like Giannis really forces his way to LA, or the Bucks are really underwhelmed with the player offers, so they look for more pick and cap flexibility. That would help the Lakers' case. But again, I don't think the Lakers are the favorites. And look, I get the criticism. I'm not going to deny it. John, thank you for the super chat. Buha, what is the lookout for the Lakers in the buyout market? Shalom, John H. ISCS E8 USN retired. I'm very glad Austin is back. Rumors are AR-15 and Luka don't like playing with Braun. Can you shed light? I do not think there's any truth to that. My understanding is they all like playing with one another. Like, I think actually, if anything, there was the report from Dan Wojcicki. I forgot if it was yesterday or the day before. I think it was yesterday, that the Lakers are more confident in their chances in that locker room and believe they're more of a playoff team than some do. I can vouch for that. I believe that is the case. And I believe part of that is Austin, Luka, and LeBron believing in themselves as a trio and believing in their ability to elevate the group. Now, you could take that a couple ways. You could look at the clutch record and say that is some evidence for that in the highest stakes, the playoff pressure cooker, they can rise to the occasion and win the big close games. You could also look at the record against above 500 teams and them being under 500, them having a slew of losses to basically all the best teams they played this season, and most of them being by double figures, and be like, it's hard to have confidence in this, with this team against another opponent in the first round. So you could take that one of two ways, but my understanding is they do enjoy playing with one another, and like Austin and Luka like playing with one another. Luka, like LeBron, he loved LeBron growing up and has spoken highly of him. I think those two have gotten closer during this stretch here without Austin. And Austin and LeBron, I mean, yes, there was the Rich Paul comments and whatnot, but LeBron defended Austin when he was asked about it by ESPN, and those two have had a strong relationship. So I would push back strongly against that assertion. And buyout market, I think now it would be Haywood Highsmith, Cam Thomas, and Lonzo Ball. I think an array of skill sets and players, but I think those would be three names to keep an eye out for, or LA eventually converting Drew Timme or signing Kobe Buffkin. Devin Smart, thank you for the super chat. Saving cap space for a free agent pool headlined by Zach LaVine is hilarious. Yeah, I think if you're the Lakers, I think the priorities this summer would and should be Giannis 1, restricted free agents 2, trading for starters from other teams who need some cap flexibility or need to just make some difficult decisions 3, then I'd be looking at the free agent pool 4th. I think the free agent pool, specifically the unrestricted free agents, should be a distant 4th in terms of how the Lakers try to build the roster. They're clearly going after Giannis, so that is like that's the Moby Dick, that's the whale of the summer. Then I think the restricted free agents, if you could nab 1 or 2 of those, almost certainly going to have to overpay to make it competitive. And then 3 would be, does a starter on another team that's maybe trying to get Giannis, trying to get a different star, or just facing the second apron, first apron, whatever, dump a player, and can you be the team that acquires that into your cap space and maybe give an asset? Those would be the 3 primary ways I would try to build the roster. If not, then you use the cap space, but the caps on the unrestricted guys. But the unrestricted guys, it's a concerning group, and that's where if they try to spin this in like their ability to do that, I'm skeptical. Easy peasy. Thank you for the super chat. Enough room to waive Maxey and sign 2 guys? I do not believe so. They did. So they're about 1.1 million under the. Now, I think there's a point in the season when they will be able to. So that's a possibility. I guess later they'd probably have to sign the 15th guy. Like, I guess you might be able to do something like waive Maxey sign someone soon, sign a buyout guy soon, than convert Drew Timme at the end of the year. That could be a path potentially, but I don't think they're going to waive Maxey. I think the Luka relationship is a big factor here. Lucas, thank you for the super chat. Do the Lakers have spots to sign buyouts? They have one open roster spot. They have 14 players under contract. We just touched on, could you waive Maxey? Could you waive Dalton, right? Like Dalton has future money, so I don't think they want to go that route. But yes, they have one empty roster spot. Is it Ajhaj? Thank you for the super chat. Can or should we get Cam Thomas? So getting a lot of Cam Thomas questions. Let's get into the Cam Thomas experience. Clearly a talented and gifted player. He is 24 years old, listed at 6'3", 210. So from a defensive perspective, he's more of a shooting. Let's say he's more of a shooting guard. The offensive potential is there. You look at the last couple of years. Last year averaged 24. The year before averaged just under 23. This year's averaging 16. But I'm always a little concerned when a rebuilding team has a look under the hood and they're like, I'm good, right? Because in theory, Cam Thomas should be a big part of Brooklyn's future and should be, hey, last year, this dude averaged 24 points and 4 assists. And, he's clearly got a bag offensively, but Brooklyn has had a look under the hood and they're like, we're good. We're going to waive him. Like they couldn't even trade him. We're going to waive him. So I think there's a bit of a red flag there. Looking more specifically at his numbers, shooting under 40% this year, right there, 39.9, but not good, not efficient. 32.5% on threes. Is shot better. The last 3 years was between 35 and 38%. The 38% was on 2 attempts, so we'll knock that off. Last couple of years has been more of a league average shooter on a high volume of threes. And then his 2-point percentage has dipped this year. Minus defender. And to me, just not really. I don't think he's got the winning mentality. He's not a guy who does the little things. He's not a guy. I think he's more of a me first than a we first type guy. And I think for a Lakers team that already has we've talked about this with Malik Monk, who I think there's a big gap between their perspectives and their ability to be in. Like I think Malik Monk tries. I just think Malik Monk is 6'2", maybe 6'3", and under 200 pounds, soaking wet, and is like, he's relatively limited on the defensive end, in part just due to his physical limitations. I don't think Cam Thomas is interested in trying. So that's where I just, is looking at his shooting splits, like his rim field goal percentage has dipped a lot. His floater has dipped a lot this year. The mid-range jumper has dipped. The 3-point shooting, as aforementioned, has dipped. He could still fill it up. He has a game this year with 41. He's had 4 straight seasons where he scored at least 40 in a game. He's a walking bucket, but the Lakers just added a defensive liability who addresses the shooting. Cam Thomas is a defensive liability who does not address the shooting and is a ball dominant player on a team with 3 players who are better ball dominant players in Luka, Austin, and LeBron. So me personally, I would stay away from Cam Thomas. Again, it's in the front office wheelhouse with he's in the Kendrick Nunn, Lonnie Walker, Gabe Vincent, JHS, certainly more talented offensively than any of those guys, but the same general thing of undersized guard who's kind of in between a 1 and a 2, offensive minded, bucket getter, doesn't really play defense or is a defensive liability. That checks a lot of the boxes of the types of players the Lakers have liked over the last few years. I think he's not a winning player as currently constructed and needs to be. Before it's his defensive numbers are at career lows for what that's worth. So I would personally stay away from Cam Thomas. Dub Raider, thank you for the super chat. I'm not a Rob fan, but what realistically could he have done given the lack or marketable assets? Granted, not having those assets is partly on Rob. Thank you for making the last point, because I think a lot of people let this slide. I think the Lakers have put themselves in this position where they have one first to trade, they have one second to trade. I think one of the underrated parts of the DFS trade that people have sort of looked past, that I've tried to make this point before, is some people were like, hey, you flip D'Lo in the 3 seconds into DFS, and then you flip DFS into, let's just optimistically say, Marcus Smart and Jake LaRavia. I think there were still pathways for LA to get DFS and at least one of those guys, but we'll say the two of them, right? Yes, but you also gave up 3 seconds for DFS, so it's not. When people compare it to, like, would you rather have Jake and Marcus versus DFS? I would argue it's more, would you rather have DFS and like the 3 seconds you gave up for him, back? Would you rather have just like kept D'Lo and let that expire and have the 3 seconds? Or would you rather have Jake or Marcus? Like, if you're going to play the what if game on the positive side of like what it turned into, you also have to play the what if game on the negative side of what you gave up and what that converted into. So basically, it converted into, I guess, like you traded essentially D'Lo in 3 seconds for Jake and Marcus, which I guess that's fair. That's a fine. You look at some of the guys that I think Jake and Marcus both would probably have like 1 to 2 second round pick values. So D'Lo is a negative asset. So sure, like that's probably a fine flip, but the Lakers are in this mess in part because they have mismanaged their draft picks and assets up to this point. And I don't think we should give them a pass and just say, well, what is Rob supposed to do? Because he doesn't have these assets. Well, it's like, yes, that's true, but why doesn't he have the assets? And who is that on, right? But I agree with you. I made this point earlier. I don't know what they realistically could have done with their lack of assets. Looking at who got traded and what got traded. Where's the 3-and-D wing that got traded that the Lakers were supposed to acquire? It's a lot of small guards and big men, or just players like the Lakers had no shot at getting. My camera's spazzing out. Joe Mumphrey, is Rob going to kick this can down the road until 2027? That's only a question that Rob can answer, but I don't think so. I think the Lakers will make some moves this summer. I'm skeptical that they can nail the summer and do everything they need to turn this team into a bona fide contender on the level of maybe not OKC, but basically everybody else in the West and just in the league. Like I don't have a lot of confidence in their ability to turn this team into an inner circle contender. So that, depending on how you view that maybe is partially kicking the can down the road into 2027, but it's always a possibility because they do love kicking the can down the road. Kevin, think of a super chat. How did Atlanta get Jock averaging 11 and 6, making $2 million, shooting 38% from 3 on 3 attempts, basically a super maxi? Why can't Rob do something similar? So you're talking about the Jock Landale trade, which I'm going to. That was part of the Lonzo. So Atlanta, I forget. I'm looking where the. So the Cavs sent the 2 picks, and the Jazz received cash. So the Jazz sent out cash. The Lakers could have sent out some cash for. The Lakers could have been a part of that. They don't have like a great track record of getting into those 3-team deals and benefiting from them, but I do like Jock Landale. I think he's really underrated backup 5. Alex Kahn, thank you for the super chat. I tried this trade and went through 3. Would you do it or not? Gafford and Sohan to LA, Gabe to San Antonio, and DA and DK to the Mavs. I would do this for LA because you're giving up Gabe, Dalton, and DA for Gafford, which I would do in a heartbeat, especially if you're not giving up a first. I think Dallas would have wanted a first tier or at least a protected first for Gafford. They also wouldn't have really wanted to give Gafford to LA. Sohan and Gabe, that's, for San Antonio. I mean, for San Antonio, they don't really need Gabe. So I guess there's a question of, does San Antonio want to do this too? From an LA perspective, I do this in a second, especially with Sohan being expiring. But I think San Antonio would have probably wanted at least the second to take on Gabe. Just, they'd be adding money technically. And I think you could argue they need Sohan's skill set more than Gabe's because they have a loaded backcourt. And then for Dallas, I think they would have wanted at least a protected first. Christopher, thank you for the super chat. Lakers trade deadline grade. Me, I give it a C+. Also, who's the biggest winner of the deadline? I'd say it's Cleveland, Minnesota, Washington, LAC, OKC. We're similar minds. They're great. So similar and great minds think alike, because I was saying I was between a C and a C+. Like the move itself, I would give a B in a vacuum. The overall deadline, though, with the options they had, and for the most part, their disinterest in trading the first and taking back any salary, I think they could have used this as a pre-agency. They chose not to. So that's where I probably give it. I might come down on it with a C, but I'm sort of in between a C and a C+. Like C, I'll say C because I think they basically did the bare minimum, which was upgrading the back end of the rotation, and they also gave up the best player of the three. Like, for as much as we can criticize Gabe and have an issue with JJ's use of him, he's better than Maxey and he's better than Dalton. And they gave up the best of the three. They gave up a second, and they also didn't address what I think is their biggest need in defense and their second biggest need in athleticism. So I'd give them a C. I think they kind of did the bare minimum, but I will at least give them a little bit of credit for doing the bare minimum when it looked like for a second they were going to do absolutely nothing. But then again, there's the opportunity cost, which I know some people are going to argue, and I totally understand that. Biggest winner of the deadline for me, I like all the teams you named. I had mentioned all those teams except for Washington. I'm not as high on Washington acquiring Trey and AD, but I think they're trying to inject some life into the fan base and franchise and expedite their process. Of those four, I think in terms of the title race, I think Minnesota and OKC improve their odds the most. Cleveland, I have zero confidence in James Harden in the playoffs in big games. So like he'll help them in the regular season. He'll help them in games 1 through 4, maybe even game 5. When it comes to game 6 and 7 and maybe even 5, I have zero confidence in James Harden. You can go annually, see when his team lost in the playoffs and look at the last 2 or 3 games of the series and his performances. So I have some real skepticism about that. But Minnesota adding Ayo, I think, is huge. And I really like McCain for OKC. I think he's an upgrade on the Wiggins, Isaiah Joe spot in the rotation. And they had 1 million picks to trade and they didn't lose anything in the rotation. So they just added to him. So I'm in between OKC and Minnesota. I guess I think Ayo's at least maybe better right now. Like McCain hasn't had the same season that he had last year. So I might say Minnesota for me is the biggest winner, but I think it's close in terms of like the title race between Minnesota and OKC, both improving their rotation. The Lakers, thank you for the super chat. Upside is top 6 of the West. Didn't get much better. Yeah, I actually was talking about this with a couple people earlier, and I still think I probably have the Lakers for me are probably 5th or 6th in the West. I think there's a top 4 for me of OKC, Denver, San Antonio, Minnesota in that order. And then I think it's close with LA and Houston. Houston losing Steven Adams, I think, was a huge blow. In general, they've been trending in the wrong direction for quite some time now. The offense has stalled out. I think it's arguable maybe between them and the Lakers, especially with their lack of playoff experience together. But yeah, I don't think this made a notable change to the Lakers playoff odds. I'm going to go through these 3 questions and then wrap here. I do have an interview I'm doing at 1:15, and my camera's obviously freaking out right now. So going to wrap with these 3. Julia or Juilliard, thank you for the super chat. If Rob strikes out on Giannis or starting 3D wing this offseason, do you think he starts feeling any heat from Mark Walter? This is a different version of a question I answered earlier, but I think this one I could get behind in terms of I think there would be more heat and pressure on him. I don't think it means he's gone. Like I don't think he's on the hot seat or I don't think he's fired, but I think there would certainly be external pressure from the fan base and the media in terms of talking a big game yet again, going into another offseason and not delivering on it. So I think there would start to be some heat on him. Diddy, thank you for the super chat. Interesting name choice. Rob targeting Giannis as a cop-out to not actually build a competent 1 through 9 rotation. He knows he can't do it, so he's just targeting Giannis to take the hard part out of building an actual team. He's bad. This is fair to the degree of I made the point on Lakers Collective and made the point on, I think, my stream after the Nets game that how confident are you in the Lakers' ability? Let's say they land Giannis. Let's say they have Giannis and Luka and Austin. They keep Austin. They land Giannis. It all works out. Do you have confidence in them building spots 4 through 10 in the rotation? Go back and look at what they did in 2021. Go back and look at a lot of their recent minimum signings. In general, minimum signings are something of a crapshoot, but the Lakers have, I think, a lot more misses than hits on their minimum, ledger. And especially if you look at it, it's a lot of like defensively challenged players or players who can't shoot, and like they've not really been able to identify undervalued 2-way players. So in 2-way in sense of being positives on both ends, not like 2-way contract players, because I actually think they've done a solid job with the 2-way contracts, but they've not found 2-way contributors, and that has been an issue. So I think even if they land Giannis, I have a bunch of questions about can they build the right roster and some real concern about that. Andrew H., thank you for the super chat. Why didn't the Lakers take the offers on DK and Maxey? Are there offers that I'm just making sure that no one has tweeted or reported anything that I have not heard? I don't really think there were offers on Maxey and Dalton. If I'm not, like, again, unless, at least to my knowledge, I have not seen or heard that. So Maxey was purely an expiring that you were going to need to attach an asset to, and clearly Atlanta preferred to take a flyer on Gabe and potentially keep him longer term than Maxey, who I think is either on the way to being a minimum player or just out of the NBA entirely. But Dalton, I just don't like. It was not enough of a sweetener. Teams were not interested enough in Dalton. So that is it's just kind of like last year they were floating Dalton plus a first, and they were able to get Mark Williams, right? Now you can't even attach him as like the equivalent of a second round pick. It's been quite the fall from grace. But with all that said, I am going to wrap here. My camera is crashing out, overheating, and I did plan on going about 2.5 hours into the 12:30ish mark. But I will be back later today. I will be attending the Lakers-Sixers game, what might be a Rob Pelinka press conference pregame. He typically talks to the media before the game on trade deadline day. So if not today, then potentially a press conference tomorrow. I don't think they're going to make the Luke Kennard signing too big of a deal, but Rob typically does talk to the media before the game. Shout out to my mom for gifting 5 new members. Appreciate it. But yeah, so I'll be back tonight. So be on the lookout for that. The game is at 7 o'clock. So I'll probably be going live around. It's going to be my first time actually driving from my new spot, which is further out. So I'll guess like 11-ish, I would say. I'll be going live, but 11 p.m. Pacific time. And we'll probably have some updates on what Rob said, what JJ said, what some of the players said, whether the Lakers won tonight. They got a big game against Philly, and that's not a team to take lightly. That is a solid team that has been playing better overall as of late. So, Embiid has been a beast lately, but appreciate you guys for rocking with me for over a couple of hours. Overall, Lakers did the bare minimum, and I will give them some credit for that, but certainly have a lot of work to do this summer, and this has shifted all the pressure and all of the attention onto this offseason. And can you land Giannis? Can you steal a restricted free agent? Can you trade for a couple starters? There's a lot of work to do, and we shall see in the coming months if LA is able to execute on that vision or if we need to have different conversations. But appreciate you guys. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tonight. I will talk to you all then. Shout out to the Late Night Gang.